Spring break was supposed to be a week of partying, sun, and total freedom. We had been planning this trip to Myrtle Beach for months, renting a beach house right on the sand, away from the crowded hotels, away from parents, away from responsibility. Just me, my best friend Nick, our girlfriends Lisa and Emily, and our two other friends, Mark and Dylan. We were all sophomores in college, and this was going to be the best week of our lives. Or at least that's what we thought. The drive to South Carolina was long, but full of excitement. We blasted music, talked about all the wild things we wanted to do, and joked about how many drinks we'd be downing each night. None of us had ever been to Myrtle Beach before, but we had heard stories. Wild parties, crazy hookups, and miles of perfect sand. Our rental house was beautiful. A massive 3-story beach house with a wraparound porch, huge windows that overlooked the water, and even a private boardwalk leading straight to the shore. It was a little older than we expected, but it was cheap, and we figured that was just part of the charm. The first sign that something was off came as soon as we arrived. Lisa was the first to notice. "Why is the whole street empty?" She was right. For such a popular destination, our part of the beach felt abandoned. Other than a few boarded-up houses, there were no neighbors, no parked cars, not even any footprints in the sand. Mark shrugged. "Probably just off-season rentals. Who cares? We have the whole beach to ourselves." That night, we settled in, unpacked, and started drinking. The wind outside howled through the cracks in the house, making the old wooden boards creak. We brushed it off and turned the music up. By 1 a.m., we were hammered. I stumbled outside to take a piss in the sand when I saw something. A woman, standing at the edge of the boardwalk just before it met the beach. At first, I thought maybe she was a lost tourist, but something about the way she stood, completely still, her long black hair hanging over her face, sent a chill down my spine. "Hey," I called out. "You okay?" She didn't move. The longer I stared, the more I thought something was wrong. The air was colder near her. The sound of the waves seemed to disappear. Then, without a word, she turned and walked into the ocean. Not towards it, into it. The water swallowed her legs, her torso, and then her head, without so much as a ripple. I staggered back, heart hammering. I ran inside, breathless, and told everyone what I saw. Nick laughed. "Dude, you're wasted. Probably a shadow." Lisa smacked my arm playfully. "Or you just saw some random drunk girl swimming." But Dylan, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly spoke up. "That's not the first time someone's seen her." We all turned to look at him. "I read about this place before we came," he continued. "This house, people say it's haunted." Lisa rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. I'm serious. There's this old legend about a woman in black. They say she drowned here decades ago, and now she lures people into the water." The room went silent. Then, as if on cue, the lights flickered. The mood instantly shifted. We laughed it off, but deep down I could tell we were all a little shaken. That night, I barely slept, and yet I kept hearing things. Whispers just outside the window, soft footsteps on the porch. Around 3 a.m., a loud bang echoed through the house. I shot up in bed. It sounded like it came from the kitchen. I crept out of my room, trying not to wake anyone. The house was pitch dark, and the floorboards groaned under my weight. When I reached the kitchen, my blood went cold. The back door was wide open. The salty ocean breeze blew through, making the curtains flutter like ghostly hands. My stomach twisted. We had locked that door. I was sure of it. I stepped closer, peering out into the night. The beach was empty. And then I saw them. Footprints. Wet, bare footprints leading from the water, straight to our door. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and backed away. The next morning, I told everyone. No one laughed this time. Things only got worse. Lisa swore she saw someone standing at the top of the stairs in the middle of the night. Mark woke up with deep red scratches on his back that he couldn't explain. And then there were the dreams. We all had them. The same dream every night. Drowning. Dark water pulling us under. A woman's voice whispering in our ears. "Join me." By the 4th day, we were done. We packed our bags, cutting the trip short. But before we left, we decided to walk the beach one last time, just to prove to ourselves that it was all in our heads. That's when we saw the name, carved into the old wooden post at the end of the boardwalk. Elizabeth Carter, 1932 to 1958. Nick's face went pale. That was the name in my dream. We ran to the car. We never spoke about it again. And to this day, I haven't been back to Myrtle Beach. I wasn't even that into him. Ethan. That was his name. He wasn't bad-looking, tall, dark-haired, clean-cut, but something about his profile seemed too polished. His bio was generic. Just a guy looking for good vibes and great company. I had matched with him on Tinder a few days ago. He messaged me first, kept the conversation going, and even when I ignored him for a couple of days, he sent another message. I know a little bar with the best cocktails in the city. Drinks on me? I wasn't the kind of girl to meet up with guys from dating apps so soon, but Julia, my best friend, had been teasing me about how I never gave anyone a chance. After a couple of glasses of wine one night, I responded, "Sure, why not?" I should have trusted my gut. Ethan picked a bar I had never heard of, the Silver Lantern. When I looked it up, it barely had any reviews. The few it did have were all weirdly vague. Good atmosphere, nice drinks, nothing specific. No details about the menu, no photos, no location tags, just empty. That should have been my first red flag. The night of the date, I got ready quickly, throwing on a black dress and light makeup. Before heading out, I shared my location with Julia and sent her a message. "If I get kidnapped, tell my mom I went out looking cute." She texted back, "LOL, you'll be fine. Just don't go home with him." That, at least, was the plan. When I arrived at the Silver Lantern, I noticed right away that it was in a weird part of town. Quiet, barely any streetlights and no other businesses nearby. The building looked old and abandoned, like something from a different era. A dim neon sign flickered above the entrance, barely lighting up the cracked sidewalk. Inside, the air was stale, carrying a faint chemical smell like cleaning products that never quite faded. The bar was nearly empty. The only people inside were a tired-looking bartender, an older couple sitting in a shadowy corner, and Ethan. He was already waiting for me, sitting at the bar, grinning like we were old friends. "Wow," he said, standing up and pulling me into a hug before I could react. "You're even prettier in person." I forced a smile. "Thanks. This place is interesting." "You'll love it," he said. "They make the best drinks here." Something about his enthusiasm felt forced, too eager. I slid onto the bar stool, trying to shake off the weird vibe. Before I could even look at the menu, Ethan waved over the bartender. "2 house specials," he said. The bartender hesitated. Then his eyes flicked to me before he nodded and walked away. I felt a prickle of unease. "You already know what I like?" Ethan chuckled. "Trust me, it's amazing." That's when I noticed his phone sitting face up on the bar. For a split second, I saw an open text thread. The last message read, "She's here." My stomach twisted. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. Maybe he was just texting a friend, but my instincts screamed at me that something was wrong. The bartender returned with 2 drinks. They were filled with a deep reddish-orange liquid that shimmered under the dim light. Almost too pretty. I lifted mine, sniffing it. "What's in this?" Ethan smirked. "Secret recipe. Just try it." I hesitated. He was watching me too closely. His eyes weren't on my face. They were locked onto the glass in my hand. My pulse quickened. Instead of drinking, I pretended to adjust my purse and, as casually as possible, tipped the glass slightly when he wasn't looking. A few drops spilled onto a napkin. I stared. The liquid reacted with the fabric, turning a faint, unnatural shade of blue. A drug test video I'd seen online flashed in my mind. Some drugs turn blue when they touch certain materials. My mouth went dry. I glanced up at Ethan. He hadn't noticed. I set the drink down and forced a smile. "Actually, I'm not feeling great. Maybe I should just stick to water." His expression flickered, just for a second. Then the smile was back. "Oh, come on, just 1 sip. I promise you'll love it." My pulse pounded. I'll pass, I said, trying to keep my voice light. The bartender was watching us now. His expression was unreadable, but there was something knowing in his eyes. I needed to leave. I pushed my chair back. I just remembered I left something in my car, I lied, reaching for my purse. Be right back. As I stood, Ethan grabbed my wrist, hard. His fingers dug into my skin. His smile didn't fade, but his grip was too tight, too insistent. Come on, he said, voice low and firm. Just stay a little longer. The bartender coughed loudly. Let her go. Ethan's jaw clenched. For a second, I thought he wouldn't let go. His grip tightened, just enough to send a spike of fear up my spine before he finally released me. I didn't wait. I walked toward the door as calmly as I could, but the second I was outside, I ran. I ran to my car, fumbling with my keys, heart slamming against my ribs. I locked the doors and sped away without looking back. When I got home, my hands were still shaking. I texted Julia everything. She sent back one message. Call the police. I did, but by the time they went to check out the Silver Lantern, it was closed, no signs of activity. And when they looked up the business records, the bar had been shut down for over a year. To this day, I have no idea what Ethan was planning. I blocked him on everything, but sometimes I still get random friend requests from new accounts with no profile pictures, and every time I wonder, was it him or someone else, watching, waiting, ready to try again? We had been planning the trip for months. A spring break road trip from Texas to a secluded beach in Mexico. Just 6 of us, ready to escape reality for a week of partying and relaxation. The rental house we found was cheap, right on the edge of a small coastal town called Bahia Roja. The pictures showed a beautiful stretch of empty beach, a fire pit, and a private dock leading out into the water. It seemed perfect. The drive down was long, but we were in high spirits. By the time we arrived, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The house itself was old but charming. White stucco walls, a wraparound porch, and a view of the ocean that felt like a dream. As soon as we got out of the car, though, we noticed something odd. There were no other houses nearby. The nearest one was almost half a mile down the beach, and we hadn't seen a single soul since entering the town. Guess we'll have the place to ourselves, Jake said, hauling his suitcase inside. It wasn't until we were settled in that we realized how quiet it was. No sounds of seagulls, no distant hum of traffic, just the waves crashing against the shore. That first night, we partied. Drinks, music, dancing under the stars. Around 1 a.m., we wandered down to the beach, our feet sinking into the cool sand. That's when we saw the first sign that something was wrong. A boat. Not just any boat, an old, rotting fishing boat, half buried in the sand. It hadn't been there when we arrived. Was this always here? Laura asked, hugging her arms. We all exchanged uneasy glances. No one had seen it before, and the thing looked ancient, like it had been left to decay for decades. Probably just washed up, Danny said, dismissing it. But something about it felt off. There were deep scratches along the wooden frame, like something had clawed at it. We left it alone and went back to the house, locking up for the night. Sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound, a slow, deliberate knocking. I sat up, heart pounding, trying to figure out where it was coming from. It wasn't the front door. It was the window. My window. I swallowed hard and slowly turned my head. Through the sheer curtains, I could see a figure, standing completely still just outside. I couldn't make out any details, just the silhouette of a tall, thin person. I wanted to scream, but fear kept me frozen in place. Then, as if sensing my terror, the figure lifted a hand and dragged it slowly down the glass. A long, scraping sound filled the room. I bolted out of bed, running straight to Danny's room. He groggily sat up as I shook him. There's someone outside. That got his attention. He grabbed a bat from his bag, and together we woke the others. Jake, always the tough guy, was the first to storm outside with a flashlight. But when we stepped onto the porch, there was no one there. just the sound of the waves and the rustling of palm trees. "Are you sure you saw someone?" Laura asked. I was about to insist when I saw it. Footprints in the sand, leading from the ocean straight to my window, but no footprints leading away. A deep, unsettling silence fell over us. No one said it, but we were all thinking the same thing. Whoever or whatever had been outside was still here, watching. That night, we locked every door, barricaded the windows, and slept with weapons nearby. Morning couldn't come fast enough. The next day, we drove into town, hoping to ask the locals about the area. But when we mentioned where we were staying, their faces changed. "Casa del Olvido," one of the older men muttered. "The House of the Forgotten," another translated grimly. They told us that years ago, a fishing crew had vanished near our stretch of beach. Their boat washed up weeks later, empty. No bodies were ever found. Some believed they had drowned. Others whispered that something had taken them. But the real curse, an old woman warned, is for those who stay there. We left that afternoon. As we packed up, Jake went to check the beach one last time. When he came back, he looked shaken. "The boat's gone," he said. We didn't ask questions. We just drove. As we crossed into Texas, we stopped at a gas station. The old cashier gave us a strange look and said, "Make sure nothing followed you back." I laughed it off, but on the road, I kept seeing shadows flicker in the rearview mirror. We drove the rest of the way without stopping. None of us spoke about it, but we all felt the same thing. Something had followed us home. It was supposed to be the best trip of our lives. A group of 6 of us, 3 guys, 3 girls, headed down to a secluded beach town in Florida for spring break. We had rented a cheap Airbnb, a rundown but spacious old house right on the edge of town. The pictures looked decent enough, and for the price, we couldn't complain. When we arrived, the place was off. It smelled damp like salt and mildew, and the floorboards creaked with every step. The owner, an old man named Joe, handed us the keys and muttered something as he left. "Don't go out to the dunes at night," he warned, "and if you hear whistling, lock the doors." We laughed it off, assuming he was just trying to scare the out-of-towners. That first night, we hit the bars, got wasted, and stumbled back to the house around 2 a.m. As we approached, we noticed something strange. The front door was wide open. "Did someone forget to lock it?" Jake asked. None of us had. We were sure of it. The house was silent inside, just the old furniture and dim lighting greeting us. But something felt wrong. The air was heavy, and it smelled like seawater, though we were a good half-mile from the ocean. Trying to shake the unease, we locked up, shrugged it off, and went to bed. Then, around 3:30 a.m., I woke up to a sound. A faint, distant whistling. It wasn't a tune, just a low, hollow whistle like wind squeezing through a crack in the wall. But there was no wind. The trees outside were still, the air humid and heavy. I sat up and nudged my friend Lily, who was sharing the room with me. "Do you hear that?" She groggily nodded. "Yeah, weird." Then we heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, just outside the house. I grabbed my phone, using the flashlight to peek through the curtains. Nothing, just the moonlit dunes stretching out behind the house. Then, as I turned off the light, something shifted. A figure, tall, thin, and hunched, was standing at the edge of the dunes. I couldn't see its face, but it was watching us. I could feel it. Lily must have seen it too, because she gasped and yanked the curtain shut. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," I whispered. Then the whistling got louder. Panicked, we woke everyone up. The guys laughed at first, but when they heard it too, their faces changed. Jake, the skeptic, grabbed a bat from the corner of the room. "I'm checking it out." We all begged him not to, but he stepped onto the porch anyway, scanning the dunes with his flashlight. Then he screamed. We rushed to the door, but Jake was already sprinting back inside, slamming it shut and locking it. His face was pale, his hands shaking. "What did you see?" I asked. He struggled to find words. It was right in front of me. Its eyes, God, its eyes. The whistling had stopped. None of us slept. We stayed in the living room, lights on, listening for any sound. But there was only silence. By sunrise, whatever had been outside was gone. But the next morning, we found something that made our blood run cold. Footprints, leading from the dunes to our front door. But the strangest part? There were only footprints coming toward the house, none leading away. We left that afternoon, cutting our trip short. When we told the Airbnb owner what happened, he just sighed. "Told you not to go near the dunes at night." Then he shut the door. I wasn't desperate for a date. I wasn't even looking for anything serious. I just wanted to have some fun, meet someone new, maybe share a drink or two and call it a night. That's how I matched with Jason. His pictures showed a handsome guy, dark blonde hair, green eyes, sharp jawline. The kind of guy you'd expect to see modeling overpriced cologne. He had a few candid shots too. One of him at the beach, another holding a dog, a final one sitting in a cozy coffee shop with a book in his hands. He seemed normal. His messages were confident but not overbearing. He asked about my favorite books, movies, what kind of music I liked. He made jokes that actually made me laugh, not just the forced LOL I usually sent to be polite. We talked for 3 days before he asked to meet up. "I know a great little spot," he texted. "A quiet place where we can talk. You'll love it." It was a small bar near the edge of the city, one I had never been to before. When I looked it up, it had decent reviews. Nothing weird. Still, something felt off. I had this tiny voice in the back of my head telling me to be careful. But I ignored it. He was just a guy. A good-looking one at that. So I agreed. I should have listened to my gut. The night of the date, I got ready, put on my usual light makeup, and threw on a dress that wasn't too fancy but still made me feel confident. As a safety precaution, I shared my location with my friend Ashley and texted her, "Meeting my Tinder date at the Hollow Bar. If I disappear, avenge me." She replied with a laughing emoji and, "Text me when you get home, dummy." I promised I would. The Hollow Bar was dimly lit with warm amber lights casting soft glows over the booths. It wasn't crowded, but there were enough people inside that I felt safe. I scanned the room for Jason, and then I saw him. Or at least, I saw someone who was supposed to be him. My stomach dropped. The man sitting at the bar looked nothing like his pictures. Oh, he had the same general features, light hair, greenish eyes, but he was off. His hair was thinning, his face had deep-set wrinkles that the pictures never showed, and he was at least 10 years older than he claimed to be. I froze. A chill ran down my spine. He spotted me, grinned, and waved me over. I should have left. I should have turned around and walked right out that door. But my brain went into autopilot. I didn't want to seem rude. So I walked over. "Emma," he said. His voice was smooth, confident, too rehearsed. Even prettier in person. My skin crawled. I forced a smile. "Are you Jason?" "That's me." I slid onto the stool next to him. My mind was racing. He wasn't who he said he was. That much was obvious. But the bigger question was, why did he lie? I needed an exit plan. Before I could say anything, he waved the bartender over and ordered 2 drinks. I tried to place an order, but he cut me off. "I already got you something special." He smirked. "Trust me, you'll love it." My pulse quickened. I had no intention of drinking anything he gave me. The bartender placed the drinks in front of us. Jason lifted his glass, clinking it against mine. "Cheers," he said. I forced another fake smile, but didn't drink. I needed to think. I needed an excuse to leave. "You don't talk much, do you?" Jason chuckled, swirling his drink. "You were a lot chattier over text." "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "It's just I wasn't expecting you to look so different." For the first time, his expression flickered. "Oh," he said. Then he laughed. I get it, my pictures are a little outdated, but hey, I still clean up nice, right? I gave him a tight-lipped smile. My heart was pounding. I reached for my phone under the table, texting Ashley as quickly as I could. He's not who he said he was. Something's off. Can you call me? Jason suddenly leaned forward, eyes sharp. No phones, he said, grabbing my wrist before I could pull away. A sick feeling churned in my gut. I told him I just need to check on my friend. He squeezed. Not hard enough to hurt, but enough to send a very clear message. I said no phones, that he repeated. I yanked my arm back. A slow smile crept onto his face, but his eyes were cold. Relax, he said. We're just talking. I forced myself to laugh like I wasn't seconds away from bolting. Sorry, I said, just checking in with my friend. Jason tilted his head. Your friend, huh? There was something in his tone, something knowing. My stomach twisted. He took a slow sip of his drink. You know, he mused, I've been on a lot of dates with girls like you. I stiffened. Girls who are too polite to leave, he continued, staring straight into my eyes, even when they know they should. My breath hitched. I stood up and told him I should go. His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist again. This time he squeezed harder. My heart slammed against my ribs. Jason, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Let me go. His grip didn't loosen. You haven't even touched your drink. Every instinct screamed at me to run. The bartender glanced over, watching us. I met his eyes, silently pleading for help. Jason noticed. His grip tightened once more before. Finally, he let go. Go on then, he said, smirking. Run along. I grabbed my purse and walked out as quickly as I could without looking like I was fleeing. The moment I stepped outside, I sprinted to my car. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with the keys. I locked the doors and peeled out of the parking lot. When I got home, Ashley had already texted me a dozen times. I called her. My voice was shaking as I told her everything. She was silent for a moment. Then, she said, Emma, I think he's done this before. A cold dread settled over me. What do you mean? She told me. She looked up his pictures. Reverse image search. They belong to some random model. His name's not Jason. My blood ran cold. I checked Tinder, my hands trembling. His profile was gone, deleted, like he had never existed. To this day, I don't know who he really was. I don't know what would have happened if I had drunk that drink. All I know is that sometimes I get random messages from numbers I don't recognize. Asking, is this Emma? I also get friend requests on my Instagram. But I've learned my lesson. I don't think I will ever talk to a stranger again, especially online. I wasn't the type to invite guys over on the first date, but with Caleb, I made an exception. He had the kind of smile that made you feel safe, like you'd known him forever. His Tinder profile was simple, just a few pictures of him hiking, hanging out with friends, and one of him holding a golden retriever. A guy with a dog? That had to mean he was normal, right? We'd been talking for about 2 weeks, and he never pressured me into anything. He seemed patient, sweet, and genuinely interested in me. So when he asked if I wanted to just chill at my place instead of going out, I hesitated for a second, but said yes. I lived alone in a small apartment just outside of town. I had a security system. My neighbor was a cop, and I figured if anything felt off, I could just kick him out. Caleb arrived around 9 p.m. He was even better looking in person. Tall, fit, dark hair, clean cut. He smelled good too, like expensive cologne and fresh laundry. The night started off fine. We ordered takeout, had some wine, and put on a random movie in the background. He was charming, making me laugh, but something about him was off. It was little things at first. When I mentioned my sister, he said, "Oh yeah, I know." I blinked. "You know?" He quickly covered. "I mean, I remember you mentioning her in our texts." But I hadn't. I shook it off. Maybe I had and just forgot. Then, when I excused myself to grab my phone from my bedroom, I came back to find him standing in my kitchen, staring at my fridge. The door was slightly open. I frowned. "You looking for something?" He turned too quickly and smiled. Just curious what you had in there. It was weird, but not alarming. But as the night went on, the weirdness piled up. He never took out his phone. Not once. Most people check their phone at least a few times, even on a date, but his stayed in his pocket the whole time. Then, at one point, he got up to use the bathroom. A few minutes later, I heard my bedroom door creak open. My stomach tightened. I quietly got up and peeked down the hall. Caleb was in my room. I watched as he turned his head, looking around, his hands behind his back like he was being careful not to touch anything. I stepped into view. What are you doing? He didn't flinch, just smiled. I was looking for the bathroom. I pointed at the door, right next to him. It's literally right there. He chuckled like it was funny. My bad. That was it. I decided I wanted him to leave, but I didn't want to make it obvious that I was creeped out. I grabbed my phone and sent a quick text to my neighbor, Officer Daniels. Can you come over? My date is acting weird. No response. I took a deep breath and turned back to Caleb. I actually forgot my friend is stopping by soon. He tilted his head. That's weird. You told me earlier your friend was out of town. My stomach dropped. I had mentioned that in passing during our texts, but I didn't expect him to remember, or to bring it up like that. I forced a laugh. Yeah, but she decided to come back early. Caleb just stared at me. The silence stretched too long. Then he smiled. No worries. I should probably get going anyway. Relief washed over me. Yeah, it's getting late. I walked him to the door, trying to stay casual. He stepped outside, turned to face me and said, "Tonight was fun." I nodded. Yeah. Then as he walked away, he said one last thing. You live alone, right? The words sent a chill through my entire body. I forced a smile and shut the door quickly, locking it. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was reading into things too much. Then my phone buzzed. It was Officer Daniels. I just got your text. Everything okay? I let out a breath about to reply, and then my security system beeped. A door had just been opened. I froze. I had locked the door. Caleb had left. The only other door was the one leading to my balcony. I turned around slowly and my stomach dropped. My balcony door was slightly open and my bedroom light was on. I knew for a fact I had turned it off. I backed away, my breath coming out in short gasps. Then my closet door creaked open. I bolted. I ran straight out of my apartment, down the hall, and banged on Officer Daniels' door. He answered immediately, gun in hand. By the time he got to my apartment, Caleb was gone, but he hadn't left through the front door. They found my phone on my nightstand, unlocked. He had gone through my messages, my photos, everything. And on my pillow was a note. I'll see you soon. I moved out a week later, but every now and then I still check my balcony door, because deep down, I know the truth. He hadn't just found me on Tinder. He had already been watching me. I started working the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital about 5 years ago. It was an old building, one of those places that had been around for decades, constantly renovated but never quite modernized. There were wings that had been shut down, hallways that led to nowhere, and rooms with peeling wallpaper that reeked of mildew and something else, something metallic. The stories about the hospital started the moment I was hired. The other nurses and techs warned me about the things they had seen and heard: footsteps in empty corridors, patients talking to people who weren't there, call lights from rooms that had been unoccupied for years. I brushed most of it off as superstition. Night shifts can be strange, and exhaustion plays tricks on your mind. But everything changed after one shift. It was a slow night, and I was covering multiple wings by myself while another nurse took her break. The halls were empty, save for the occasional low beep of a heart monitor or the soft murmur of a TV left on in a patient's room. I was sitting at the nurse's station, flipping through some paperwork, when the intercom crackled to life. At first, it was just static. Then I heard it. "Help me." The voice was faint, almost a whisper, but it made the hairs on my arms stand up. I glanced at the phone, confused. There was no caller ID, no indication that the call had come from a patient room. Then, after a pause, another whisper. "Room 4009. I frowned. There was no room 409. The hospital only had 3 active floors. Any rooms on the upper floors had been shut down years ago due to budget cuts. I stood up, debating whether to check the security cameras, when I heard something even stranger, the faint sound of a call light beeping. I turned toward the monitor that displayed patient calls. "Room 409. My stomach dropped. The number was blinking red, demanding attention. But that was impossible. I had passed that hallway earlier. There was nothing up there but locked doors and abandoned equipment. At that moment, a security guard walked past. I flagged him down, pointing at the screen. "Look at this." He leaned over and frowned. "That's not supposed to be possible. Those floors don't have power." We stared at each other for a few seconds before he finally sighed. "I'll go up with you, just in case." We took the stairs since the elevators didn't run to the upper floors anymore. The air grew colder with every step. By the time we reached the 4th floor landing, I could see my breath in front of me. The hallway was almost pitch black, lit only by a flickering emergency light at the far end. The doors to the old patient rooms were still there, most of them covered in dust and grime. But one door was slightly open. The number on it read 409. The security guard exhaled sharply. "That's not right. These doors should be locked." I reached for my flashlight and stepped forward. The door creaked loudly as I pushed it open. The room was empty, mostly. The bed had been removed long ago, leaving behind deep scratches on the floor where the frame had once been. An old wooden chair sat in the corner, covered in dust except for one thing: the seat. It looked recently disturbed, as if someone had been sitting there. Then we heard it, a soft, wheezing breath. It wasn't coming from the room, it was coming from behind us. We spun around, shining our flashlights down the hallway. At first, there was nothing. But then, the emergency light flickered one more time. And for half a second, we saw it. A woman. Her skin was gray, her hair stringy and unkempt. She stood barefoot in a hospital gown, her arms hanging limply at her sides. Her face was a blur, like static on an old TV. Then the light went out completely. The hallway plunged into darkness. I grabbed the security guard's arm, my pulse hammering in my ears. Neither of us moved, neither of us breathed. Then the sound came again, closer this time, shuffling footsteps, slow and deliberate. The guard reached for his radio, but all that came through was static. Then, directly in front of us, the woman whispered, "You shouldn't be here." We ran. We tore down the stairwell, not stopping until we reached the well-lit 1st floor. The second we burst through the doors, the radio crackled back to life. "All units, report." The security guard was shaking as he pressed the button. "We need someone to check the 4th floor. Now." An hour later, maintenance and a second security team went up. They found nothing. The chair in room 409 was overturned, but there were no footprints, no signs of anyone else being there. That was the last time I ever set foot on that floor. But strange things kept happening. Call lights flickering on in empty rooms, the intercom whispering static at odd hours. Patients waking up in the middle of the night, staring at their doorways, whispering about the woman watching them. One elderly patient grabbed my wrist during a routine checkup a week later. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "She's looking for someone," she whispered. I tried to laugh it off. "Who is?" "The nurse," she said, her pale eyes locking onto mine. "She died in that room, you know." My blood ran cold. Later that night, as I was heading out to my car, I passed by the hospital's old archive room. Curiosity got the best of me, and I searched for anything about room 409. It took me an hour, but I found it. In the 1970s, a nurse had taken her life in that very room after a patient under her care died from a medication error. She had blamed herself, and in her final moments, she had left a note on the chair. "I'm sorry. Please forgive me." I never went back to the 4th floor after that. But sometimes, even now, when I pass by the old stairwell, I swear I hear a chair creak. And just as I turn the corner, I catch a glimpse of something in the reflection of the window. A woman in a faded hospital gown. I wasn't the type to invite guys over on the first date, but Alex seemed different. He had this easygoing charm, a relaxed way of talking that made me feel comfortable. We had been texting for a week, and he hadn't once made me feel weird or pressured. He was cute too. Tall, dark curly hair, a sharp jawline. His pictures were mostly candid, goofy ones, some with his dog, others at the beach or hiking. "You're seriously cool as hell," he had texted me the night before. "We should hang out soon." I hesitated. He lived about 40 minutes away and I didn't really feel like going out. But when I mentioned that, he offered to come to me. "No pressure," he said. "I can just stop by for a bit, chill, watch a movie or something." It sounded innocent enough. I figured we'd just talk, maybe drink a little. I wasn't expecting anything more than that. So I said yes. I should have said no. The night he came over, I had an uneasy feeling in my stomach. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I brushed it off as first date nerves. When he texted me that he was outside, I took a deep breath and opened the door. The moment I saw him, my stomach twisted. He looked different. His eyes were glazed over, red-rimmed and unfocused. His posture was slouched, and he had this lazy, almost predatory smirk on his face. "Hey," he drawled, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. A strong smell clung to him. Weed, alcohol, something else I couldn't quite place. I hesitated before closing the door. "Are you okay?" He laughed, running a hand through his messy curls. Yeah. Just had a little pre-game, you know?" I didn't know, and I suddenly wished I had never let him in. We sat on the couch, and within minutes, it became painfully obvious that he was more than just a little high. He kept shifting, laughing at things that weren't funny, his eyes darting around the room like he couldn't focus. "You're so pretty," he slurred, reaching out to touch my leg. I scooted away. "Thanks." He moved closer. "Like, seriously, damn, you smell good." He leaned in, inhaling deeply near my neck. I jerked back. "Okay, chill," he grinned. "What? Am I moving too fast?" I forced a laugh. "A little." He sighed dramatically, flopping back onto the couch. "You're one of those good girls, huh?" Something in his tone made my skin crawl. I tried to steer the conversation back to something normal, but he wasn't interested. "Look," he said after a few minutes, his voice lower. "I didn't drive all the way here just to sit and talk." My stomach clenched. "Well, that's kind of what I agreed to," I said lightly, trying to keep things calm. His jaw tensed. "Come on, we're both adults. You're really gonna act like you don't want to have a little fun?" I forced another laugh. "Alex, I don't even know you like that." His smile faded. For the first time since he arrived, I saw something in his eyes that made my blood turn cold. Annoyance, frustration. "You know," he said, rubbing his temples, "I could have gone to a party tonight. I had options." "Then maybe you should have gone," I said before I could stop myself. His head snapped toward me. For a few seconds, he just stared. Then he chuckled. "Damn, you're really playing hard to get, huh?" He reached out again, this time grabbing my wrist. I yanked away, standing up. "I think you should go." His expression darkened. "Are you serious?" "Yeah," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. "I don't think this is working out." He stared at me, his jaw clenched. Then, to my horror, he leaned back and spread his arms over the couch, grinning. "Nah," he said, "I think I'll stay for a bit." Ice shot through my veins. I grabbed my phone, opening it to text my friend. Alex laughed. "What, you gonna call the cops on me?" His voice was mocking, like this was some kind of joke to him. I didn't answer. I just took a step toward the door. That's when he stood up. He moved fast, closing the space between us in seconds. "You're acting crazy," he muttered, gripping my arm. His fingers dug into my skin. "Relax, I was just messing around." "Let go of me," I said, my voice shaking. His grip tightened. "You invited me here," he hissed, "and now you're kicking me out? That's rude as hell." Panic surged through me. I was alone in my apartment with a guy who was bigger, stronger, and clearly not in his right mind. I needed to get out. I swallowed hard, forcing my face to stay neutral. "Okay," I said slowly. "Let's just chill, all right?" He eyed me suspiciously. I forced a smile. Let me just grab us some drinks. He hesitated, then finally let go of my arm. I walked toward the kitchen, heart hammering. The moment I was out of his sight, I grabbed my keys and slipped out the back door. I ran. I didn't stop running until I was outside my neighbor's house, banging on the door. When they opened it, I gasped, "Call the cops." By the time the police arrived, Alex was gone. My front door was wide open, and when I checked my phone later, there was a message from him. A single text. "You shouldn't have done that." I've been a night shift nurse for almost 10 years. I've seen it all. Patients swearing they've seen ghosts, sudden deaths in rooms where no one was supposed to die, and things caught on security cameras that no one could explain. But there's one night I'll never forget. It happened at Rosewood Memorial, a hospital built in the 1950s. Over the years, it had been expanded, but certain parts of the building remained untouched. The old psychiatric wing, the original ER, and the abandoned basement level, which had been sealed off decades ago. No one went down there anymore. It was supposed to be empty. That night, I was assigned to the ICU, a quiet ward tucked away on the 4th floor. Most of our patients were critical, hooked up to machines that beeped softly in the background. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the scent of antiseptic filled the air. Around 2:30 a.m., things started getting weird. I was finishing up a chart when I heard the first noise, a soft, distant sound, almost like footsteps. I glanced down the hall, expecting to see a doctor or another nurse making their rounds, but there was no one. I went back to my paperwork, but a few minutes later, I heard it again. This time, it was louder. Not just footsteps, a dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled along the floor. I stood up, my heart pounding slightly. The ICU was secure. No patients could leave their rooms on their own, and visitors weren't allowed past 10 p.m. I checked the security feed from the nurses' station. The cameras showed the hallway empty. Then, just as I was about to look away, I saw it. A shadow. It moved across the floor near room 417, stretching unnaturally long under the flickering fluorescent light. I blinked. The shadow was gone. I told myself I was just tired, that the screens had glitched. But as I was about to sit down, one of the patient call lights flickered on. Room 417. My stomach tightened. The patient in 417 was a comatose elderly man. He had been unresponsive for weeks. There was no way he had pressed the call button. Still, I grabbed my chart and walked down the hall, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The door to room 417 was slightly ajar. I knocked lightly before pushing it open. The old man lay in his bed, still as ever, the machines around him beeping steadily. Nothing seemed out of place until I looked at the window. There were streaks on the glass, smudges, like someone had been pressing their hands against it. I shivered. The ICU was on the 4th floor. There was no way anyone could have touched that window from the outside. I walked closer, my breath fogging the glass slightly. The smudges looked almost like handprints. Suddenly, the monitor beside the bed beeped erratically. The old man's heart rate was spiking. His fingers twitched and his eyelids fluttered. Then with a sudden gasping breath, he sat up. I jumped back, nearly dropping my chart. His eyes, pale and unfocused, stared past me, his mouth moving soundlessly. Then, in a voice that wasn't his, he whispered, "He's coming." The monitor flatlined. I scrambled to call for a code blue, but deep down I knew it was pointless. The man was gone. The doctors rushed in, trying to resuscitate him, but I couldn't move. Because just before the doctors arrived, I had seen something in the reflection of the window. A figure. Tall, thin, standing in the corner of the room, watching. By the time I dared to look back, the figure was gone. The death was ruled natural. No one questioned it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been in that room with me. The next night, I checked the security footage again. At exactly 2:32 a.m., the camera outside room 417 glitched for 6 seconds, and when it came back, the call light was on. But there was something else. For just a fraction of a second before the static cleared, I saw a face. Not the old man's. Something else. Something grinning. And then the screen went black. After that night, things at the hospital didn't return to normal. Strange occurrences became a regular part of the night shift. Equipment would malfunction in room 417 for no reason. Nurses would hear whispering when no one was there. Patients in nearby rooms would complain about cold spots, saying they felt like someone was watching them. For weeks after his death, staff reported seeing a shadowy figure at the end of the hall, just standing there. Security cameras would pick up movement in the empty room, but whenever someone went to check, it was empty. The most disturbing part? The handprints on the window kept appearing, no matter how many times they were wiped away. Eventually, the hospital sealed off room 417, claiming they needed it for storage. But those of us who worked there knew the truth. Something had been disturbed that night, and even after his death, Daniel Whitaker wasn't done with the hospital. I had been working the night shift at St. Augustine Memorial for about 6 months when it happened. It wasn't a fancy hospital. It was old, and no amount of repainting could hide the decades of wear on its walls. The fluorescent lights in the hallways always flickered, and there was a constant hum in the background from the ventilation system that never quite worked right. Most of the night shift nurses joked about how the place was haunted, but I never paid much attention. I had heard the usual rumors, strange figures appearing in the halls, the sound of whispers in empty rooms, and a patient in room 309 who supposedly saw something the night before he died. But I had never experienced anything myself until that night. It started with something small. I was doing my rounds, walking past the dimly lit rooms, checking in on patients. Most of them were asleep, save for the occasional restless moan or the soft beep of a heart monitor. Then at the very end of the hall, I saw something that made me pause. An elderly woman stood by the window of room 316. Her hospital gown was faded, her white hair long and stringy, and her back was slightly hunched. At first, I thought she was just another patient who had wandered out of bed, which wasn't uncommon in the geriatric wing. I took a step closer. "Ma'am, do you need help?" She didn't move. I stepped into the room, but the second I reached the doorway, I realized something was off. The bed in room 316 was empty. No patient had been assigned to this room. I turned back to the window. She was gone. The air felt heavy, pressing against my chest. I walked over to where she had been standing and looked outside, expecting to see a nurse wheeling her away. The parking lot was empty. I stood there for a long time, trying to rationalize what I had just seen. Maybe I was overworked. Maybe it had just been a trick of the dim lighting. Then, out of the silence, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. A whisper. I spun around, scanning the room. There was no one there. The whispering grew louder, like a raspy voice struggling to speak. It was coming from behind me, from the window. I turned back. There, reflected in the glass, was the woman. But she wasn't standing by the window anymore. She was right behind me. Her mouth moved, whispering words I couldn't understand. Her sunken eyes locked onto mine. I felt frozen in place, my breath caught in my throat. Then, in the blink of an eye, she was gone. I stumbled out of the room, my heart pounding. My hands were shaking as I returned to the nurse's station. I didn't tell anyone what I had seen. I didn't want to sound crazy. An hour passed. Then the monitors started beeping. Room 314, a patient named Mr. Ellis. His heart rate had suddenly spiked. I rushed inside, expecting to find him in distress, but instead he was sitting up in bed, pale as a ghost. "She was here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Who?" "The old woman." "Who?" he said. "She was standing right by my bed, watching me." I swallowed hard. "What did she say?" His lips trembled. I couldn't understand it. She just kept whispering. He grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. She touched my hand. It was so cold. I tried to reassure him, but the truth was I was just as shaken as he was. I checked his vitals. Everything looked stable, but he wouldn't stop shaking. I stayed with him for a while until he calmed down. But as I turned to leave, he grabbed my wrist again. "She's still here," he whispered. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. The rest of my shift passed in an eerie silence. The next morning, I finally worked up the courage to ask one of the older nurses if she had ever heard of a patient matching the description of the woman I had seen. Her face went pale. "You saw her?" she asked. I nodded. She exhaled slowly and looked around before speaking. "There was an old woman who died here years ago. She was a long-term patient, completely alone. No family, no visitors. She used to wander the halls at night looking for someone to talk to. One night she passed away in her sleep. Since then, people have seen her." A lump formed in my throat, and every patient who sees her. The nurse hesitated. "What?" I pressed. "They don't last long." My stomach twisted. I went home that morning, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. But the next night, when I came back from my shift, I learned that Mr. Ellis had passed away in his sleep. I never worked the night shift again. And sometimes even now, when I pass that dark hallway, I swear I feel a pair of cold, sunken eyes watching me.